Before this episode begins, a short description of this growing up in Irish Boston in the 1940s podcast. Episode number 48, Boston Ethnicity and Conflict Stories. In the 1940s and 50s in Boston, there were many different first and second generation ethnic and racial groups. Yankees were the descendants of the early settlers and in charge. Other Protestants, not part of that ascendant tribe, also benefited from that Yankee power. Then the Irish arrived in great numbers. The Italians came soon after. The French Canadians, the Lithuanians, and the Poles began to arrive. The blacks came from the south and from the islands like Jamaica and Trinidad. The Jews came from Eastern Europe to Mattapan and Dorchester. Chinatown grew from Chinese immigration. A few Indians, Albanians, Scandinavians, and Greeks got here also. What my father called herring chokers and squids came from Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. Often those folks were what we call two-boat Irish. They immigrated first to Canada, then later immigrated to Boston. The following are a few racial incidents in Boston that I remember in my 85 years on the terra firma. Number one, when I was maybe 8 years old and beginning to think for myself, I asked my father why he disliked Jews so much. He told me a long story about a Jewish furniture store owner in Cambridge's South Central Square who ripped him off on a piece of furniture that he bought. I don't remember the gory details. He then added in his colorful language that all Jews were dishonest. I loved my father, and I was swayed by his story somewhat. I didn't know any Jews at the time, so I figured my father was right. Later, my experiences proved him wrong. Number two, I grew up in the time of the ongoing battle of Irish Americans taking over the political and social power formerly controlled by Yankee Protestants. Banks, big companies, and colleges were controlled by the Yankees. But the Yankees were losing that power slowly, beginning with Irish elective victories. My brother Gary, graduating with honors from Harvard with a competitive scholarship, is a good example of that Yankee prejudice. His Boston area Protestant Harvard classmates were recruited by Boston banks for their junior executive positions. His application was rejected, and although the reason was not specified, we knew it was because of his Irish name and his Roman Catholic faith. Yankee-controlled State Street Bank and other Boston banks hired only Protestants for executive jobs at that time. So there was blatant discrimination by Boston's powerful organizations against Irish and other Catholics. Number three, in my neighborhood, almost no blacks lived in the area where we lived. But the area to our west, Western Avenue, was the home of most Cambridge blacks. Many of those blacks were from the islands like Jamaica or Trinidad. Landlords would not rent to blacks other than in that area, with very few exceptions. Using the 1970 U.S. Census data, all of Boston's suburban towns, with the exception of Cambridge, were 98% white, and the Harvard Civil Rights Project showed that a majority of blacks was still concentrated in only 7 of the 126 communities in Greater Boston. And there were many other racist things that black folks endured at that time in Greater Boston. I had many black friends in Cambridge. I'm surprised that they never brought up that kind of racism to me in our many conversations. Number four, at Blessed Sacrament Grammar School on Pearl Street in Cambridge in 1946, a new student was enrolled at our all-boys fourth grade class. Before Klaus Whitker, a pseudonym, all my classmates were born here in America. This was a year or two after the end of World War II. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, was just down the street from our neighborhood. It was and is the best engineering college in the world. Professors and scientists from MIT were partially responsible for the atom bomb. The Nazis had their own brilliant scientists working on their atom bomb, but we beat them to it, and the war was won by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, which was Germany's ally. I make the assumption, with some evidence, that our intelligence service, the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, founded by a legendary Irish American, Wild Bill Donovan, recruited some of Germany's nuclear scientists after the war. The OSS was the precursor to our CIA. My further assumption, again with some evidence, is that Klaus Wittke's father was one of those Nazi nuclear scientists. He was brought to MIT to further strengthen our nuclear weapons program. So new immigrants, Professor and Mrs. Wittke, faithful Roman Catholics, sent their son Klaus and his younger sister to the nearest Catholic grade school, Blessed Sacrament School. My and my classmates' reaction to this kid was shock. We had been thoroughly propagandized by newspaper and radio stories about the murderous and inhuman Nazis. All the war movies at our nearby Olympia Theater in Central Square portrayed Hitler, the German war machine, and its people as monstrous. But the nuns were insistent that no ridicule or harm come to Klaus or his sister from other students. I am sure that the Catholic school authorities were expecting discrimination, maybe taunting and revenge from us boys. Discipline at Catholic schools was quick, harsh, thorough, and supported by parents, so none of that unrest happened. Mostly we thought of Klaus as if he were a weird zoo animal. Klaus's dress, his language, and his appearance were strange and were very alien to us, mostly Irish American kids. He was very pale, thin, had straight, stringy blonde hair, and his clothes were different, but he was quiet and caused no commotion. Slowly he was accepted by us, but not befriended. Klaus went to school with me and my classmates all the way through graduation from Cambridge Latin School. I never had much to do with him. He was quiet and a very good student. Without Catholic school discipline, that situation would have been much more troublesome, racial, and conflicted. These are just a few stories from Boston's racial history. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episode. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and perhaps refer friends who might be interested in this podcast series. Again, my thanks.